Peace, family. It's your brother, Marc Lamont Hill. You're watching the Marc Lamont Hill official YouTube channel. Israel's war on Gaza has reached day 191. This is never easy to do, but we have to cover this story every single day. Unfortunately, mainstream media doesn't. Unfortunately, corporate media outlets attempt to hide what's happening in the Gaza Strip, what's happening in Palestine, what's happening in the Middle East. And so we're here to cover it every single day. The reason we call it Israel's war on Gaza is because what we see here is not simply a war against Hamas. This is not an evenly matched or uh, equally empowered battle between two entities. This is a colonial struggle and an anti-colonial struggle. This is an act of genocide that is being witnessed by the world. And sadly, so many of us are not doing enough. Some of us are not doing anything to stop what is a full-fledged assault on the Palestinian people, what is an act of genocide, and what might be one of the most egregious human rights abuses in the world. It's certainly not the worst, but it is certainly pretty damn bad. And that's why we're here every single day to cover it. It's why we're here every single day to make sure that these events, these crises, these problems don't go unnoticed, unexamined, uncritiqued. So we start off Israel's war on Gaza, the conversation, by looking at the numbers. It's always important to look at the numbers. As it stands right now, 33,729 Palestinians have been killed and 76,371 have been wounded in Israeli attacks in Gaza or on Gaza since October 7th. Again, 33,729 Palestinians have been killed. 76,371 have been wounded in Israeli attacks on Gaza since October 7th. The death toll in Israel from Hamas's October 7th attacks stands at 1,139. Again, since October 7th, the Israeli death toll stands the same at 1,139, with dozens of people still held captive. They're hostage, they're kidnapped, whatever word you want to use. Innocent people, civilians, both Israeli and other foreign nationals have been held captive since October 7th. All those are part of the numbers, and it's important to capture that because there hasn't been one day, not one single day, that I've covered this war on Gaza where the number of Palestinian deaths hasn't gone up. There's a reason for that. Shia Beth Evans says some HRW, that's Human Rights Watch numbers, are saying 40,000. Well, look, 40,000 is not wrong. There are 8,000 people under the rubble right now. There are 8,000 people under the rubble. If you got 8,000 people under rubble, you're already looking at 41,729 just with the 8,000 under the rubble. And that rubble number is also going up. So it's absolutely more than 40,000 people killed. It's absolutely more than 76,000 people wounded. This war on Gaza has devastated, absolutely devastated the Palestinian infrastructure, the Palestinian culture, the Palestinian built environment, the Palestinian educational space, all of it. You got like 70% of the buildings destroyed. You got all the universities gone. You got most of the hospitals destroyed. You got most of the primary and secondary schools destroyed. I mean, you're talking about something inexplicably destructive. And it's something that we have to be honest about and something that we have to tell the truth about. But very often we don't want to tell the truth about this. Very often we don't even want to acknowledge the numbers of Palestinian people. And this goes back to the 80s when the New York Times wouldn't publish the numbers of Palestinians who had been killed in Lebanon. This is the reality. This is the reality. So just something to think about. That's all I want to say. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called for de-escalation at the UNSC and said the world could not afford another war in the Middle East. Now, what Secretary General Guterres was talking about, of course, is what's happening right now between Israel and Iran. Um, it is not surprising that we're having this conversation right now, as Iran engaged in a response to Israel's attack earlier in Damascus. And the response was pretty intense. The United States effectively said that Israel's response was high. They said it was at the high end of what they expected. That's according to U.S. officials, and the Associated Press verified this, I think, earlier today. In fact, the Associated Press, citing officials who spoke on the condition of anonymity, said that despite the high interception rate, Iran's intent was to destroy and cause casualties, and that if successful, the strikes would have caused an uncontrollable escalation across the Middle East. At one point, at least 100, I read this last night to you, 100 ballistic missiles from Iran were in the air at the exact same time, with just minutes of flight time to Israel. Now, we also heard today that the U.S. said that they are going to not even consider joining, and I don't say won't consider. They said they've ruled out joining any Israeli counterattack against Iran. Israel's war cabinet concluded a meeting without a decision on what action to take in response to Tehran's first direct attack against the country. And this places Israel in a very unique position. In response, Israeli forces bombed the Nusayrat refugee camp in central Gaza. They killed 5. They wounded dozens. This is all happening at the same time. De-escalation is absolutely necessary. I agree with the Secretary General, because the last thing you need is Iran and Israel fighting. And while the U.S. said they won't join in, that simply means they won't have U.S. boots on the ground. There will absolutely be U.S. support for this. I mean, U.S. is providing the weapons. U.S. is providing the defense system. U.S. is providing the shielding in the UN Security Council. They're providing money, weapons, defense systems, and political coverage. I mean, I don't know. You could say they're not part of a counterattack, but they are the counterattack in so many ways. So that's the big story today, really, is sort of what does it mean for the U.S. to engage in or not engage in retaliation, but also what is Israel going to do? We know they're not going to take it lightly. You know they're going to engage in the maximum retaliation possible. We know that. So what do you do? What do you do if you're... I don't know. I don't know. The U.S. is in a very interesting position. There's a way that the Iranian attack or strike will look like an offensive strike as opposed to a retaliation from Israeli aggression. The world is never going to look at Iran as a country that could be defending itself, because they don't believe that Iran has a right to defend itself. And so the world is going to say, okay, Israel was attacked. They're responding. U.S. supports it. For a president going up for re-election for Biden, he's in a tricky position. The world is war weary, and they're not standing with Israel nearly as much as they were even a month ago, much less 6 months ago when the war started. So now, even if Israel were right, even if you took the position that Israel was right to strike in Damascus, and that they're right on the right side of history now, the fact of the matter is, it just doesn't, that dog doesn't hunt. You know, you're not going to vote. You're not going to vote here. You're not going to vote, or I should say, you're not going to win here if people don't vote for you. People aren't going to vote for you if they're tired of war, and if they're exhausted and reasonably disgusted about what's happening in Palestine right now, in the Gaza Strip. I don't know what Biden can do. If Biden goes with his conscience, that's one answer. If he goes, well, what has historically worked, that might be one answer. And if he goes with what will win an election in 2024, he's not sure which one of those correlates. he's in a tough spot. I'm not saying I don't have I have no sympathy for Biden because all he has to do is do the right thing, but and the conflict comes from him not being willing to simply do the right thing. But it's an interesting position to watch him be in. Anyway, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has spoken with his counterparts in Jordan, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt in the wake of Iran's retaliatory attacks against Israel. And it's important to keep saying retaliatory attacks because the world will have you believe that Iran just came out of nowhere attacking Israel. During his conversations, Blinken reiterated that Washington is not seeking escalation in the region, but will continue to support Israel defense. So effectively, we're going to throw rocks and hide hands. Another thing that's happened, and this is something that's huge, Joe Biden urges the White House to pass a bill with $14 billion in aid for Israel. He urged congressional leaders to pass a spending bill that includes $14 billion in aid for Israel in a phone call to discuss Washington's response to Iran's retaliatory attacks. The president says, look, there's a necessity to stand with Israel that my party recognizes. That's what Joe Biden says to his people and also to apparently Mike Johnson, the Republican House Speaker. And that he said he would try to advance a spending package this week, $14 billion. Every year we give significant amounts, but $14 billion in aid for Israel is wild. Now, this is part of a bigger project that the Biden administration has had, which has been to press the Republicans in the House to pass a $95 billion U.S. national security supplemental spending package. That package has money for Ukraine, and we've talked about this here before, Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. This is very, very important stuff. Anyway, I'm gonna leave y'all alone. As you can see, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of danger. There's a lot of threats to there's just a lot of violence. There's a lot of threats to a lot of vulnerable people. But at the end of the day, we have to end the war on Gaza. We have to demand a ceasefire, a permanent ceasefire, not a temporary one where Israel gets its hostages back and then Gaza goes back to being bombed. We need one where everyone is safe. Everyone has self-determination and dignity and ultimately justice. But that can't happen until there's a ceasefire. So hopefully we're fighting for that. I'll be back tomorrow with more updates. Obviously tomorrow, you'll see a lot more news outlets covering this. But again, make sure the news outlets that you watch are covering this with accuracy, with fairness, with objectivity, relative objectivity, and a critical eye. So that's all I got to say. Everybody hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and of course, hit the join button if you're so inclined, or if you want to donate directly to the channel, you can using our Cash App and our Venmo. It's MLHTV. I look forward to talking to y'all again soon. Be here tomorrow. In fact, be here Monday to Friday at 10:30 p.m. for Night School, which is where we cover a million issues. It's not a TV show. It's not a podcast. It's a global classroom where we learn, we study, we build, we grow. All right, y'all. I'll see y'all later. Peace.